At 8:54, the phone finally went quiet. One lamp stayed on in the garage, not bright enough to clean anything, just enough to show the boxes along the wall, the same taped corners, the same marker names from another decade. You stood at the hallway threshold, still carrying the nonprofit director's calm voice in your throat, the one you had used all day, and then again on the family call. A grocery bag rested on the floor. It had been moved there without much thought, from the chair to the concrete, beside a stack of things no one had looked through in years. And for a moment, the room did not feel forgotten. It felt like it had been waiting, quietly holding proof of who had tried, who had provided, who had stayed longer than anyone knew. Understanding came late. Still, it came. The garage had that way of keeping time without moving. Not the kind of time that lived on a calendar, with meetings and calls and reminders stacked against one another. This was the slower kind, the one that stayed in cardboard corners and old tape, in the dented side of a box that had been carried from one house to another and never fully opened again. You could still feel the call in your ear. Family voices do that sometimes. They leave a small weather behind them. Even after the screen goes dark, even after the phone is placed face down or left on the edge of a shelf, the room keeps holding the last few words. Not loudly. Just enough that you stand still longer than you meant to. The day had asked for so many versions of you. At work, there had been the steady voice, the one people trusted because it did not shake easily. There were emails that needed care, numbers that had to make sense, someone's concern that needed to be heard without being swallowed whole. A nonprofit office can carry more need than its walls can show. It can make a person gentle and tired at the same time. Then home had its own doorway. Not one doorway, really. Several. The front door. The hallway. The garage threshold. The invisible line where work starts leaving your face and family enters it again. Most evenings, that change happens without any ceremony. A bag comes in. Shoes pause near the mat. The light gets turned on. Something cold is put away before anyone notices it was almost forgotten. Tonight, it was the grocery bag. It sat on the floor, soft at the sides, holding ordinary things. Maybe a carton, a loaf, something bought because someone would need it tomorrow. It did not look important. It looked like one more task that had made it into the house. But sometimes the ordinary things arrive before understanding does. The chair beside it had been cleared almost by accident. The bag had been moved down to the concrete, where it made a small paper sound and leaned against itself. No announcement. No intention. Just one tired hand making room for something else. And then you saw the boxes. Not as clutter. Not as one more unfinished corner. Not as a project waiting for a free weekend that may never feel free enough. You saw them as evidence. Boxes from another decade, with names written in marker that had faded but not disappeared. A holiday bin. A file box. A plastic tub with one cracked corner. Something from an old room. Something no one had needed badly enough to search for, but no one had been ready to throw away. The garage had not changed much. That was part of what made it tender. The shelves still held the same kind of practical silence. The concrete still gave back the day's coolness through the soles of your feet. The lamp still put a small circle of gold on things that had survived being ignored. For years, maybe, you had passed rooms like this without really entering them. You had walked through with the trash, with a broom, with a box of donations, with a distracted mind already leaning toward the next obligation. You had seen the mess but not the care inside the mess. Tonight, after the family call, something shifted. Not all at once. Just enough. You thought of the people who had kept things because keeping was the only language they had for love. The people who saved receipts, folded bags, labeled boxes, made space in crowded corners, and believed that one day someone might need what had been put aside. Maybe they never called it tenderness. Maybe they would have laughed at the word. But their hands knew it. There was tenderness in making room. Tenderness in bringing groceries home after work. Tenderness in leaving a lamp on so no one had to enter the dark. Tenderness in the part of the room no one photographs, where the useful things wait without asking to be beautiful. The phone stayed quiet. The house seemed to know not to ask for anything yet. Somewhere beyond the garage, there may have been a sink, a hallway, a room with bedtime still settling into the walls. But here, at the threshold, you were not quite at work and not fully at home. You were between the two, with one hand empty and one part of your heart arriving late. The grocery bag remained on the floor. Small. Plain. Enough to hold the whole evening still. The grocery bag had not been placed neatly. One handle had folded under itself. The paper had a soft crease near the bottom, the kind that comes from being carried against a coat, then set down too quickly. There was nothing graceful about it. It was only there, beside the chair, under the lamp, at the edge of a room that held too many years to look simple. Still, your eyes stayed with it. Maybe because the day had been full of careful words. At the office, words had to be chosen with patience. They had to leave room for people's worry without adding more to it. They had to make plans sound possible, even when the budget was thin and the need was not. You had learned how to speak in a way that helped a room keep breathing. But family calls are different. They do not always ask the person you have become to answer. Sometimes they reach past all that. Ask the title. Ask the calm voice. Ask the practiced patience. They find the older part of you, the one who remembers what a certain pause means, what an unfinished sentence used to carry, what it felt like to stand in a house and understand only half of what the adults were trying to hold. The phone had gone quiet, but not everything in you had. You stood in the threshold because thresholds are easier than rooms. They let a person pause without admitting they have paused. One foot can belong to the hallway. One shoulder can belong to the garage. The body can delay choosing where it is supposed to be. For a few moments, no one needed an answer. That was rare enough to notice. The boxes along the wall seemed ordinary at first. Storage. Holiday things. Old documents. Maybe toys that had lost their owners to age. A cooler that only came out twice a year. A folded chair with dust on the legs. Things that had stayed because nobody had the extra strength to decide their ending. And then the room changed without changing. You saw how much of a life becomes stored in places that do not look like love. Garages, closets, basement shelves, the back of a laundry room. Places where people put what they cannot carry every day but cannot quite release. Places where care becomes practical, unsentimental, almost invisible. There were probably nights, years ago, when someone stood in a room like this after everyone else had gone inside. Maybe they had set down groceries too. Maybe they had come home tired and opened the garage door to the same dim light, the same waiting boxes, the same uneven stack of responsibilities. Maybe they had paused, not because they were thinking deeply, but because their hands were full and their heart had not caught up. You had not seen it then. Children often cannot see the weight around them. Even adult children miss it for a long time. They remember the tone of a voice, the strictness, the hurry, the way someone forgot to be soft at the exact moment softness was wanted. They do not always see the bag in the hand, the bill on the table, the drive home in silence, the quiet accounting of what could be bought and what had to wait. Understanding comes late because living takes so much attention. Tonight, it came through a grocery bag on a garage floor. Not as an apology. Not as a grand forgiveness. Nothing that clean. It came more like a small loosening in the chest, a little room made around an old judgment. You could still remember what hurt. You could still know what was missing. But now, beside the boxes from another decade, you could also feel the tiredness that must have been there, the care that had no pretty language, the way people sometimes love by keeping the house supplied. The lamp hummed faintly. The concrete looked pale beneath the bag. Somewhere in the house, evening continued without needing to be witnessed. A door may have clicked softly. A refrigerator may have started its low sound. The hallway behind you held the life you were supposed to return to, the dishes or messages or small bedtime residue still waiting in the corners. But the garage held you for another breath. There was tenderness here, hidden where nobody would think to look. Not in a framed photograph. Not in a birthday card saved in a drawer. Not in the part of family life that gets told nicely later. It was in the paper bag with its tired handle. It was in the old boxes that had kept standing. It was in the strange mercy of seeing the past without needing it to become simple. The longer you stood there, the less the garage felt like a place for things. It felt more like a place for what had not been said. Not secrets exactly. Nothing dramatic. Just the small, unfinished parts of a family that had been stored without anyone meaning to store them. A box of old school papers. A plastic bin with winter things. A stack of picture frames turned toward the wall. A bundle of extension cords no one had used in years, kept because someone once believed they might matter again. The room knew how to keep quiet. Maybe that was why the moment could happen there. Not in the kitchen, where there would have been more movement. Not in the living room, where the couch and the television would have made the evening feel ordinary again too quickly. Not upstairs, where bedtime would have gathered around doorways and softened voices. Here, nothing needed to be performed. The garage was not asking to be beautiful. It did not arrange itself for anyone. It held old dust, practical shelves, a broom leaning in the corner, the faint smell of cardboard and concrete. It held the grocery bag on the floor without making it symbolic. It simply let the bag be there. And somehow that was enough. You thought again of the family call. Not every word. More the shape of it. The pauses. The way one person tried to sound fine. The way another sentence ended before it reached the thing it was circling. The old patterns that can appear in a voice before anyone has time to stop them. After a day of helping other people find language, it could feel strange to have so little of your own. At work, people might have looked to you for calm. A meeting could tilt toward you when tension rose. A donor could need reassurance. A staff member could need someone to notice the strain behind their professional tone. You knew how to listen for what was underneath. You knew how to leave space around another person's worry. But in the garage, after the call, there was no room to manage. Only to feel what had arrived. It was not blame. It was not peace either. It was something quieter than both. The kind of understanding that does not erase anything, but changes the lighting around it. The past stays where it was. The hard parts stay hard. The missing tenderness does not suddenly appear in the right places. But another detail enters. A grocery bag. A lamp left on. A room that kept old boxes because someone, somewhere, did not know what else to do with the years. Sometimes care looks like a person carrying too much and still stopping at the store. Sometimes it looks like keeping the extra chair, the old file, the winter coat that may fit someone again. Sometimes it looks like a garage that never became tidy because life kept coming through it with both hands full. You had not always known how to see that. There may have been years when the mess only looked like mess. When the silence only sounded like distance. When the practical tone in someone's voice felt like coldness because you needed softness and did not receive it in a form you could recognize. That was real too. The room did not argue with it. The boxes just stood there, holding their faded labels. The grocery bag leaned on the floor, a little tired, a little ordinary. The lamp kept its small yellow circle over the chair and the concrete, over the part of the house no one thinks to remember until the remembering has already started. A car passed outside, soft behind the closed garage door. Then the quiet came back. There was a tenderness in that return. Not the kind that explains itself. Not the kind that asks to be forgiven or praised. Just a tenderness that had been hidden in plain things, waiting for a night when you were old enough, tired enough, and still enough to notice. You did not have to make anything neat. The bag could stay on the floor for another minute. The past could stay partly unfinished. And gratitude, when it came, did not feel bright. It felt like seeing one small evidence of care and letting it remain small. There are rooms that only become visible when the rest of the house quiets down. During the day, a garage is mostly a passage. A place to step through. A place to drop something, search for something, move something out of the way. Its usefulness can make it disappear. The mind does not pause there unless a tire is low, a box is missing, or the trash needs to go out before morning. But tonight, the garage had become a room again. Not a pretty room. A true one. The grocery bag stayed where it had landed, with its paper sides slumped slightly inward. It seemed almost shy under the lamp, as if it knew it did not belong to memory yet. It was just groceries. Something brought home. Something practical. Something that would be emptied later and folded down or thrown away without ceremony. And still, it held the shape of care. You could feel that now, in a way you might not have felt earlier in life. Earlier, care had needed to sound a certain way to be believed. It needed warmth in the voice. It needed patience at the right hour. It needed someone to look up from what they were doing and see the whole of you, not just the next thing that had to be handled. That kind of care mattered. It still does. But the older you became, the more another kind of care began to show itself in the corners. The kind that did not know how to speak tenderly, but knew how to come home with bread. The kind that forgot to ask the gentle question, but remembered the appointment. The kind that sounded tired and practical, because there were too many things to keep from falling through. The garage held that kind of language. Boxes from another decade stood along the wall like quiet witnesses. They had no desire to defend anyone. They did not turn the past into a softer story than it was. They simply remained, carrying the odd evidence of family life, old labels, saved cords, holiday pieces, tools bought for a repair that had seemed urgent at the time. A life leaves traces where nobody plans to look. The family call had stirred some of those traces. Maybe a name had been said. Maybe a memory had been mentioned too quickly. Maybe someone had spoken in the old way, careful and indirect, and you had felt yourself become both adult and child in the same breath. That can happen so quietly. One moment you are standing in your own house, with your own work behind you, with responsibilities that prove you have lived many years since then. And the next moment, some small tone carries you back to a kitchen, a hallway, a car ride, A room where you waited for someone to be less tired than they were. The garage did not hurry you out of that feeling. It did not ask you to choose one version of the past. It let the room stay complicated. It let gratitude arrive without making old pain disappear. It let tenderness be hidden, not because it was ashamed, but because some families only knew how to place love inside errands, storage shelves, and bags on the floor. You looked at the grocery bag again. Maybe tomorrow, no one would remember it had been there. It would be emptied. The food would find its places. The chair would be free. The lamp would be turned off. Morning would make the garage ordinary again. But for this small part of the night, the bag remained. So did the boxes. So did the threshold. And something in you stood there with them, not trying to fix the old room, not trying to explain the call, not trying to become more generous than you honestly felt. Just present. The house kept its quiet witness. The lamp stayed on. And in the part of the room no one photographs, tenderness waited without needing to be found by anyone else. By then, the night had settled more fully around the house. Not completely. Houses rarely become completely quiet. There is always some small sound continuing underneath everything. The refrigerator starting again. A board easing in the wall. A pipe remembering water. A far-off car going down the street. The little movements that prove a home is still awake in its own way, even when the people inside have begun to lower. The garage held those sounds differently. They came in softer there, through the door, through the walls, through the space between boxes. The room seemed separate from the rest of the house, but not lonely. More like a pocket of stillness attached to ordinary life. You remained at the threshold. Not because there was anything left to decide. The groceries still needed to be put away. The lamp still needed to be turned off. The chair, now empty, would probably hold something else tomorrow. But for these few minutes, nothing had to move. That was its own kind of mercy. The family call had ended, yet it had opened something that did not close just because the phone went quiet. You could feel the old room inside the present one. Not clearly. Not like a memory with clean edges. More like the sense of standing near something you had once misunderstood. A younger version of you might have walked past the same garage and seen only disorder. Boxes no one sorted. Bags left on the floor. A lamp still on when no one was using the room. Things saved too long. Things placed wherever there was space. The whole quiet accumulation of a family trying to keep going while pretending it was only storage. Tonight, it looked different. Not better exactly. Just wider. The grocery bag on the floor made room for that wider seeing. It did not explain the past. It did not excuse anyone. It simply sat there, holding its ordinary weight, and reminded you that care is often tired by the time it reaches home. Sometimes love arrives with poor timing. Sometimes it comes in through the garage instead of the front door. Sometimes it sounds practical because tenderness got buried under errands, bills, work shirts, late calls, and the need to keep tomorrow from becoming harder. Sometimes it sets the bag down, forgets where it put the receipt, and turns off only half the lights before going inside. For a long time, that kind of love can be hard to recognize. Especially when you needed another kind. The room let both things be true. That may have been why gratitude could enter without pressure. It did not have to be large. It did not have to cover the whole past. It did not ask you to feel finished with anything. It only came as a quiet noticing. There had been care here. Imperfect care. Hired care. Care with rough edges and missing words. Care that did not always know how to look like care when someone young was waiting to be understood. But still, care had passed through rooms like this. It had lifted boxes. Saved bags. Kept lights working. Carried groceries in after long days. Made sure there was something for morning. You stood with that for a while. The lamp made the concrete look warmer than it was. The boxes cast soft, uneven shadows. The grocery bag leaned close to the chair, as if it had no idea it had become the center of anything. That helped. Important things do not always know they are important. They sit on the floor. They wait by the door. They get stepped around and picked up later. They become visible only when the heart has slowed enough to see what was always there. At 8:54, the night had not offered an answer. It had offered a room. A garage with boxes from another decade. A phone gone quiet. One lamp still on. A grocery bag on the floor in the part of the house no one photographs. And you, standing between work and home, between what was remembered and what was understood too late, feeling the past become a little less flat. The house kept breathing. Nothing had been solved. But something had softened enough to stay. Before turning off the lamp, you looked once more at the grocery bag. It had not moved. The boxes had not changed. The garage had not become beautiful. The family call had not become easier to carry. But the room felt a little more honest now, as if it had allowed one quiet piece of the past to be seen without being pressed into words. Understanding had come late. Maybe it often does. It comes after work, after the phone goes quiet, after the house has lowered its voice. It comes in a place no one photographs, beside a chair, under one small lamp, with tomorrow's groceries waiting on the floor. You bent down and lifted the bag. For a moment, the paper was warm from your hand. Then you carried it inside, gently, while the garage kept its tenderness in the dark.